Okay, I think our stream's active now. We're good to go.
All right.
Welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast.
We're your hosts, Dan, Luke, and Dan.
And Justin. We ask critical questions about the Bible and provide mostly questionable answers. We've been on kind of a summer hiatus.
Yeah.
So glad to be back in the spare bedroom / studio with you. Missed you.
Thanks. I haven't seen you in months now.
Like a week, you mean?
Months.
A couple days?
Yeah.
Sure. Anyways, do you remember where we left off in Exodus chapter 4?
Oh. I thought you were just going to say, where did we leave off? But then you had to be more specific, and the answer is no.
That's all right. That's all right.
I know we were in Exodus.
That's right. We're in Exodus. We previously did chapter 4, and we're going to move into chapter 5. And in chapter 5, I would describe it as some Moses gets a dose of reality.
Yes, a full dose.
Yeah, a pretty thick one.
Very thick.
So let's go. We're going to jump right into it, and then we've got a new setup in our studio, so we're going to try to have the verses on the screen while we're reading, so you guys can read along with us. And if you want to select the same translation that we're reading from the NRSV currently, although we're on Bible Gateway, so we can change it to whatever we need. But I think the NRSV will serve our purpose for now.
Yeah, if it's really hard, we'll just pull up the message too.
I don't know if that's necessary ever.
We'll see.
But I mean, we can barbecue it in the backyard later when we're done, because I think that's what's probably the best use of the Message Bible. Light on fire.
I'm told we can't be heard
On the message?
right now.
Oh, we can't be heard?
Yeah.
Our microphones can't be heard. That's interesting.
Testing.
We're streaming, but no one can hear us. Wonder what's causing that. Let me check on that. Output settings. I don't see any reason why our microphones wouldn't be working. Well, we might have to stop it and restart it. I don't know why the microphones aren't working, to be honest. They can see the video, but they can't hear the microphones? Good thing someone was watching.
Yeah, that's...
Oh, goodness.
Sad.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
That's weird. Why? What? I'm going to pull it open on the phone.
Okay. Oh, a good idea.
And see what happens on the phone.
All right.
It's already in my search history.
Well, that's crazy.
Because we're so famous.
Yeah.
It says we're live.
Well, that's cool.
And I can hear me talking in the microphone. I can hear you talking in yours.
Why is there such a delay?
Gotta go through the ether.
That's weird.
I think your sister might not have her phone set up.
Okay. Yeah, it says she can see the video on her phone, but now she's using the computer and it works there. So we're good.
Oh, good. Okay. So it must have been her phone.
It was not us. It was our one viewer.
We're good now.
Okay, sweet.
Fantastic. Okay, so audio check done. We're good to go. Fantastic. All right. Let's go ahead and read.
Okay.
We're going to read paragraph by paragraph through. And we're going to stop when we have questions or comments. And then if you got questions or comments, put them in the chat box, and we'll be reading the chat during the live.
This is live.
This is live, for sure. Actually, although we need to sign into the chat.
Of course. We're professional.
Our name is so long that I have to type it in. It takes like a full minute to type in our email address. And then when you make a typo.
Yeah, .com.
Oh, yeah. I need a dot between Gmail and com. Let's try it now. Our password is easy, actually.
Don't tell
I won't tell anyone
what
it is.
It's actually really hard.
Is it? course, two-factor authentication. It says on your phone to authenticate.
Okay. Let's.
So much hassle just to get technology to work.
I know.
All I want to do is hit go and stream. All right, the chat window's open. All right. Now we can communicate.
Oh, there's a Q&A poll, huh?
All right, let's get into it. So I'm going to get the verse pulled up. And Dan, you want to read the first paragraph?
Sure. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should listen to him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has revealed himself to us. Let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord our God, or he will fall upon us with pestilence or sword." But the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their work? Get to your labors."
Let's stop there. Let's pause there because I've already got questions.
Okay, sweet. Maybe I can answer them for you.
Maybe. The first question is the last thing you said. What? It almost sounds like the Pharaoh is telling Moses and Aaron to get back to work.
Yeah.
They're not working on anything. What are they working on?
They got to be doing something, right? I mean, maybe not Aaron.
Do you think that the Pharaoh didn't know? Because remember earlier it says that a Pharaoh arose in Egypt that didn't know Joseph, so on and so forth. So
didn't know who they were. Didn't know who Moses was.
Yeah, is it possible that like the current Pharaoh doesn't really know the whole backstory here? He just, hey, there's this weird Hebrew.
Actually, that's possible. Yeah.
So when the Pharaoh's like, hey, Moses and Aaron and the rest of the Israelites get back to work, he probably doesn't know that they're like chilling out in the land of Midian and not actually doing any work. Although, as we've already covered, they're not really slaves in Egypt. They're clearly forced labor, maybe. Like they're not forced labor. They're paying tribute to
Yeah. A lot of places did that back in the day, though, right?
Yeah. For example, when the Israelites went into the Promised Land, there was a group of people that they considered they were forced labor. But their labor was to carry the water for the Israelites. And then we had similar things where people were forced into being designated tree cutters, things like that.
Wait, so in here we got the Egyptians making the Israelites forced laborers. Yes?
Kind of seems like that. It's kind of like they're...
Hold on. But then when they get into the Promised Land, they're doing that to some other people?
Yeah.
That's kind of...
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on.
I mean, there's no parallels to real life, of course.
Oh, not at all, no.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even, and I don't want to get too far off the beaten path here, but in Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25, God gives them provisions to own slaves, not in the Egyptian type, but like the Atlantic type. So that's a topic for a different conversation. We're going to get to that when we do Exodus 21, so let's not worry about it now.
Okay, we'll be there in 3 months.
Exactly. Well, we'll see. We'll try to move through it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But the fact of the matter is, if it's true that the Egyptians weren't necessarily owned as property, which we know they weren't, the Egyptians didn't own the Israelites as property, like proper slaves. They were just living in the land, and they were forced to produce a certain amount of work for them. Mm-hmm. That would better explain the situation, why Moses and Aaron can come and go freely.
And why a lot of the slaves were like, why do we have to do this? We were better off there, when they get freed.
Yeah, exactly. Because when they're in the desert and they don't have food or water, like, we're going to die here. Well, we would have been better off as serving in Egypt. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, it makes a lot more sense of it. The second question I have, I don't know. Yeah, that does clear. The second question, though, is Moses said something really interesting. He said, "The God of the Hebrews has revealed himself to us. Let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord our God, or he will fall upon us with pestilence or sword." Where did Moses get this idea from? Because Yahweh didn't say that was going to happen.
No, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, it's taken from did God mention the 10 plagues yet to Moses? Or
Yeah, he kind of knows that there's some things coming. Ooh, excuse me. But Moses was never told that that he's going to experience like plagues or pestilence. You know what I mean? Or maybe is Moses maybe using I don't know, a license to embellish?
I don't know. I mean, either he talked to God, but not all of it was recorded in the Bible.
That could be true as well. We see a lot of that where it's like there was clearly a discussion that was had, but the reader is not privy
Right.
to the discussion.
Because otherwise, I am not sure why he would make that up.
Yeah. Or perhaps he just thought that, well, if God is going to bring the plagues, he's going to bring it on everybody.
Yeah. And that's also, yeah.
That's a possibility too, right?
Yeah.
I could see that.
So he's doing this all more, for himself too. He's like, I don't want this to happen.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because, like, what if this whole time Moses himself is like, oh shoot, we can be in trouble if this thing doesn't work out. Moses himself might be a little bit under the gun here. He kind of assumed a pretty heavy position. Let's read 5 to the end of the paragraph then. Or do you want me to read?
Oh,
want to take turns, or do you want to read? You're the English major. You're so good at it.
That's so true. All right. Pharaoh continued, now they are more numerous than the people of the land, and yet you want them to stop laboring? That same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people, as well as their supervisors, you shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks as they have made previously. Do not diminish it, for they are lazy. That is why they cry, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let heavier work be laid on them. Then they will pay attention to it and not to deceptive words.
Yeah.
Wow, Moses just stuck his foot in his mouth on that one, right?
There are some things there. So like Moses spoke up as God told him to, and it sounded like Pharaoh didn't handle it too well. Which makes you wonder, was Moses, he wasn't, because he's going to complain about it soon. Why wouldn't God tell Moses to be prepared for this?
Maybe he did. We don't know.
Well, because he complains about this later in chapter 6.
Oh, I've read that far,
of course.
Obviously.
Yeah, so I know. Listen, God doesn't have to tell his messengers everything, right? But it seems like he might have did him a little bit dirty there by telling him, "Hey, go talk to Pharaoh and do this, this, and this." Then he goes and talks to Pharaoh and is like, well, I don't give a crap about what you said on account of that I'm the damn Pharaoh and I don't have to care what you have to say. And then do you think Moses was blindsided by that?
I don't know. I mean, did he really believe that just by invoking the name of a god that the Pharaoh hasn't heard of?
Right, yeah. How's Pharaoh going to know?
Yeah, Pharaoh was just going to say, oh, okay, I'll do whatever you say. I'm sure Moses is not that stupid.
Oh, Yahweh said so. Yes, of course. Yes. Well, Yahweh said it. Of course you can go. Yeah. Pharaoh does not care about your servants' deities.
I have to assume Moses went into this knowing that Pharaoh was probably not going to go along with it.
Yeah. It would be hard for me to believe that a rational thinking person would go into this thinking that Pharaoh was going to take it well. Unless he was overconfident, like, well, God told me to do it, so obviously it's going to work out in my favor. But even that, it's a little bit foolhardy to think that, because remember, Pharaoh thinks of himself as part God, right? So I would imagine that this whole thing would be pretty offensive to him. I don't think he's going to take that well.
Right.
I had one thought
Mm-hmm.
on the numbers because it says in verse 5, Pharaoh continued, "Now they are more numerous than the people of the land."
Mm-hmm.
And when I first read that, I thought to myself, that's kind of nonsense. But I did a little bit of research. So there's a wide range of estimates as to how many Egyptians and non-Egyptians lived in Egypt at the time period. And if it's true that there were more, at this time, there were more Hebrews than Egyptians, then that means there would have been roughly 2.5 million Jews there, at least. And now, when I first thought about that, I thought that was really, really high. It just seemed inconceivably high that there'd be 2.5 million Jews there, or Hebrews there. And that's what we have in other parts of the Old Testament and in the book of Numbers. It says that there were 600,000 fighting men that exited Egypt.
Okay.
And if we do the math on that, include the women and children and whatnot, you get like 2.5 million or so.
Okay.
So, but the thing of it is, I looked at as much data as I could find for the population from the time period, and given what we have here, it seems to be that the total population would need to be at least 4 or 5 million people for this statement to be true. And there seems to be some evidence for that Egypt was so big back in the late Bronze Age here that it really could have supported 4 million people to 5 million people, which is pretty wild to think about because you think about all these ancient kingdoms as being
tiny.
Yeah, relatively small.
I mean, 4 or 5 million people. I mean, how many people are in Ohio?
I don't know, but like Cleveland alone is only like 1 million people. But Cleveland is a city and Egypt is a country.
Yeah, and oh well.
You know what I mean? Let me pull up size of.
I guess I think of Egypt as a I don't know.
Let's see the size of Egypt
Kingdom.
versus America. I'm just curious to see what pops up.
Uh-huh.
All right, so here's a basic map, and it looks like this is Egypt proper. I wonder if I can make this bigger. Oh, what just happened? I can't make it bigger, unfortunately. There we go. View image. You zoom in. There we go. So Egypt proper is up here. Then on the right, so Egypt itself is pretty damn big. I mean, we're talking about Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma, plus part of Arkansas, Missouri, and Iowa, all in Colorado, Texas. I mean,
it is pretty big, yeah.
It doesn't look big when they draw it on maps because I think everything is so like USA centric, but that's not a small place,
right?
You know what I mean? But on the contrary, though, look how small Israel is. This tiny little sliver is Israel. That's
where?
It's just northeast of the border of Egypt.
It's so tiny I can't even see it.
I know. I know. So, anyways, I think what we learned just now is that Egypt's actually pretty good size. It's possible. Now, I do think some of the numbers in the Bible might be a little overestimated, but this is not overestimated to the point to where it's not possible. It's definitely possible. You know. Any thoughts before we move on to the next paragraph?
None whatsoever.
Okay, I'll read verses 10 through 14 for us.
Okay, you don't like the way I read?
You can read all of them if you want. I don't want to.
That's fine.
I don't want to be a taskmaster and burden you.
I appreciate that. I see what you did there. All right, go ahead and read.
I knew you'd get it.
Yeah.
So the taskmasters and the supervisors of the people went out and said to the people, "Thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go and get straw yourselves, wherever you can find it, but your work will not be lessened in the least." So the people scattered throughout the land of Egypt and gathered stubble for straw. The taskmasters were urgent, saying, "Complete your work, the same daily assignment as when you were given straw." And the supervisors of the Israelites, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set them over, were beaten and were asked, "Why did you not finish the required quantity of bricks yesterday and today as you did before?"
Well, that's silly. Like they don't know why.
Yeah, isn't that a weird paragraph?
Yeah.
Because that's when we keep reading these stories, I'm always trying to put myself in the story. And if you're one of these overseers, you can't be that dumb.
Right.
You know what I mean? To me, it kind of smacks of taking a embellishment of the story just a little bit, just kind of telling it to make a point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how hard the work was and how terrible the Egyptians were. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm gathering.
Were they actually beaten?
No, they were beaten. It was the overseers, right? It says, the taskmasters had set over them were beaten.
So they didn't beat the Israelites.
It seems like they were
just like the supervisors of them, if that makes sense.
Well, it's hard to say because in verse 14 it says, and the supervisors of the Israelites, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten.
Mm-hmm.
So were the supervisors of the Israelites other Israelites?
I mean, yes, I think they were.
You would think so.
But yeah, so they were just beating like a small handful of them then, I reckon.
But the ancient world was pretty ruthless. What are the odds that it was actually an Egyptian or a group of Egyptians watching over the Israelites, and that they were beating their own people for not really enforcing the...
I mean, it's possible.
It seems
does
unlikely.
Say the Israelite supervisors.
Right.
So that feels like Israelite is modifying supervisor.
Well, it says the supervisors of the Israelites, but
no, it says Israelite supervisors.
That's verse 15. We didn't read that far yet.
No. It's 14. And the Israelite supervisors.
It says, and the Israelite supervisors whom Pharaoh's... Yeah, but I was reading 13, wasn't I?
No.
So I'm in... So this is actually interesting. I'm reading from the NRSV.
Let me just pull up the message here and see what we got.
Well, I'm reading the NRSV, and the passage we actually have on the screen is the NRSV updated edition.
Okay.
Which means it's not exactly identical. This is an interesting change because in the NRSV regular, it says the supervisors of the Israelites. But in this one, it says the Israelite supervisors.
So updated means it's more accurate?
No, it's just more recent.
But why would they update it and make it less accurate?
Well, I don't think accuracy is always the goal. Sometimes they're trying to better capture the meaning of the text. Which goes to what I was saying. In biblical Hebrew, it's very difficult to express the genitive sense of. So, like when you say like Dan of Ohio, that's not a phrase that usually works well in biblical Hebrew because they don't have like a standalone word to mean of. You would have to say from or on or about, or you have to give some sort of preposition. So when you say like the supervisors of the Israelites, that's a very difficult phrase, right? I can see why they've translated it in multiple ways. You know what I mean?
Okay. I'm trying to get my Bible app working, but it's got all this other fluff nobody needs.
Well, I mean, the one that we've got open might already have the message.
No. Oh, well, yeah.
I mean,
I figured you weren't going to look at it since it's...
well, the message is trash, and it's really only good to burn as a bonfire kindling. But for you, I'll pull it up, and we'll see what it says in 13 and 14.
Nice. I like that.
So it says, the Israelite foremen, whom the slave drivers had appointed, were beaten and badgered. Why didn't you finish your quota of bricks yesterday, or the day before, and now again today?
The Israelite foremen.
Right.
So they were foremen who were Israelites.
Well, that's what they're suggesting here, and I'm okay with that. That's not to say, I don't think we should waste a ton of time on it because that certainly is. Certainly is.
And we have.
It certainly is a way to interpret it. Now, here's the NASB, and they have a pretty wooden translation of the Hebrew typically. And I like this. It says, moreover, the foreman of the sons of Israel. And of the sons of Israel is a very, very common phrase in Hebrew. The B'nai Israel. And I'm inclined to believe based on the NASB that it's the foremen of the sons of Israel, because you wouldn't find, I don't know what word they use, maybe sar, or there's lots of words they could have used here, but I'm inclined to believe that since it says the sons of Israel, that is directly connecting the foreman to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyways, so the Message, I think, gave us a good, clear reading of the text.
That's right.
As did the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition, but not so much the New Revised Standard Edition. They didn't do so good there, did they?
I have no idea.
Anyways, back on task.
Yeah.
What were we talking about? So yeah, the Israelite overseers were getting whooped on,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes, they were.
Which makes a lot more sense, I think.
Yeah.
But it does bring up a good question as to what kind of structure they had. That the people overseeing the work were the same group of people doing the work.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not that couldn't have happened in slave communities, but
I bet it did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I always wondered when it says that they collected the stubble. So in verse 12, it says, "So the people scattered throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw because they weren't given straw."
Yeah.
I always wondered, like, you have to go on somebody's field to go collect the stubble, right?
Uh-huh.
Were the poor farmers warned that these Egyptian or these Hebrew workers are going to now just infiltrate your lands?
Right.
Like, hey, be alarmed or be aware. There's going to be a bunch of strangers wandering around your fields now looking for,
I bet that
stubble.
did not help the Egyptians to, like them.
No, that
And
certainly
they probably
wouldn't.
didn't realize that Pharaoh was the one doing this, responsible for it, right?
Especially not if you're living in a kingdom of 5 million people.
Yeah.
There's no way that the Egyptians knew what was happening very much.
All they saw was these guys taking, apparently stubble has a purpose. And
Yeah.
so they probably wanted their own stubble, right?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
So they were like, wow, these daggone Israelites.
They're just turning up on my field, collecting all the stubble.
Yeah, that's
know what
my
I mean?
stubble.
Well, although I'm inclined to
My
believe
stubble.
that they probably didn't care about the stubble all that much. The stubble was left over after you already reaped,
Well, it must be having some use if you can make bricks out of it.
Well, yeah, but the farmers aren't making bricks. The farmers are farmers.
Well, what can you make out of stubble instead of bricks?
That's it.
That's it?
Can't do anything else with it. You can, I mean, if you have the mental fortitude to go outside and pick all of it out of the ground or off of the ground, you could feed it to your pack animals, I guess. But
Okay.
it's too laborious. Like, a farmer's not going to go out there and hand pick all the stubble. That's why it's a punishment for the Israelites.
Huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's not just that you won't get straw anymore. It's that you have to go collect this stubble, this thing that's basically worthless.
Yeah. Like trash straw.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, exactly. It's like the remnants,
It's going to be even harder to make bricks now.
It's like, you ever see someone that's used the same toothbrush for 20 years and it's like
Yeah.
worn down to like this? There's like almost no bristle left in. You're like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? That brush is not doing anything anymore. It's kind of what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's read the next paragraph, huh?
Cool.
I got 15 through 21.
Then the Israelite supervisors came to Pharaoh and cried, "Why do you treat your servants like this?"
Yeah, you look like you're
And
deep
I'm
in
just
thought on that
thinking,
one.
would Israelites who are actual Israelites, say, treat your servants? You know what I mean? That feels like something an Egyptian would say to the Pharaoh, right?
Well, yeah, it says, then the Israelite supervisors came to Pharaoh and cried, "Why do you treat your servants like this?" Although it's very common for people that are subservient in the Bible to refer to themselves as your servant. It's a sign of submission.
It just felt like it was a little too nice. I would say, why are you treating us like slaves? or something. You know what I mean?
Well, you can't adjust the Pharaoh like that. The Pharaoh's the one that's, well, making your life harder.
So you're like, why are you making it harder?
Yeah, so in the Amarna tablets, there's a bunch of tablets that were written between the Pharaoh and the city states in ancient Canaan during the 1300s. They're referred to as the Amarna tablets because they were found in El Amarna in Egypt, and a lot of them are probably from Pharaoh Akhenaten. And all of the letters that are written to the Pharaoh are really interesting because even though they're like almost on the same level, it's like from the mayors of the cities or the governors of the various cities, they always open the letter with like, greetings from such and such, your servant and slave. I lay on my face 7 times and on my back 7 more times, and I'm, the dirt between your toes. Like there's this endless groveling towards the Pharaoh because he's the most powerful guy in existence, right? And so when you address him, you do everything you can to what's the word I'm looking for? Ingratiate yourself to him.
Butter him up.
Butter him up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're just trying to prop up his ego as much as you can so he gives you a better treatment, right? That's how I interpret this. I interpret this as them doing everything they can to appear as though they're respecting the status of the Pharaoh, if that makes sense. That makes sense?
Okay. No straw is given to your servants, yet they ask us, make bricks. Look how your servants are beaten, but the fault is with you. No straw is given to your servants. So no straw is given to the Israelite slaves, right?
Right.
Yet the slaves, they come back and they say, wait, no, that can't be right. Yeah.
You're really struggling with this, huh?
Yeah. Some of these verses, they're not written well.
I get that, yeah.
So they need to use the proper nouns, not just they and us. And so no straw is so you're not so they're not getting any straw.
Right. Yeah.
But the Israelites still have to make bricks.
Right, yes, that's the thing. Yep.
Yet they say to us, make bricks.
Yeah, no straw is given to your servants.
Which is them.
Yeah, they say to us, well, that's again, if you think that the Israelites overseers are the Israelites' servants, which I don't know if we've 100% confirmed that there's even just one classification of overseers. For example, when Solomon has a temple built and he conscripts labor for the temple building, there's actually multiple levels of management, which is really wild to think about. So it's possible here that there's actually multiple levels of supervisors and overseers and whatnot.
Okay. So no straw is given to us, the Israelites, who are your slaves. Yet the people above us, who are Egyptians, say, hey, make bricks. Look how we, us, Israelite slaves, are beaten. But the fault is with you, Pharaoh. And then he said, "You're late." Who's he?
I think this is the Pharaoh now speaking to.
Okay. So the Pharaoh said, "You are lazy. That is why you say, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Go now and work, for no straw shall be given to you, but you shall still deliver the same number of bricks." The Israelite supervisors saw that they were in trouble when they were told, "You shall not lessen your daily number of bricks." As they left Pharaoh, they came upon Moses and Aaron, who were waiting to meet them. They said to them, "The Lord look upon you and judge. You have brought us into bad odor with Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us."
Is that where they get? I think this is something you would know. Is that where they get the phrase "odious"?
Definitely. I don't even have to look that up.
Okay, I was curious about that. That's such a good word.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Have you used that in real life? I don't know if I have, but I really want to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at some point of my life. It's not really a word I use that often.
My mother used to say odiferous, which is different than odious.
It sounds, yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Anyways, I think they mean roughly the same thing, don't they?
I don't know. Stop putting me on the spot, okay?
I listen. You're the English major.
No,
I assume you know all things about the English
I just
language.
coasted through on like a C- average, okay?
All right.
All right.
So this is the interesting part. Look at verse 16 where it says, "But the fault is with you."
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that takes some balls. Say that to the Pharaoh,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I thought you were saying they were trying to butter him up.
That's what I would have thought.
And now they bring down the hammer.
Yeah. Although I would imagine, I'm curious to know if there's any amount of poetic license being used here by the author.
Well, what did the message have it say?
Well, I don't know if we really care about the message, do we?
I always care, but my Bible app isn't working, so.
Oh boy. Now I want you to read with me real quick. In the NRSV non-updated version. Watch what it says. It's really wild. It says, "Then the Israelite supervisors came to Pharaoh and cried, 'Why do you treat your servants like this? No straw is given to your servants. Yet they say to us, make bricks. Look how your servants are beaten. You are unjust to your own people.'" Your own people, it says. But we don't get that in the updated edition.
Can you show me where you're reading?
Yeah, where it says right here, but the fault is with you.
Yeah.
In the previous edition of the NRSV, it doesn't say that. It says, let me get it again. You are unjust to your own people. Now, there's a footnote here, and I bet it's a footnote for a textual variant.
Mm-hmm.
It is, yes. So there's a footnote here. In the Masoretic text, it says, "But the fault of your people," which is similar to what we read in the NRSV regular. But they must be using a different manuscript here where it says, "But the fault is with you."
So in this one, they're blaming the Pharaoh.
Yeah.
In the other one, they're blaming the Pharaoh's, supervisors or whatever, right?
It is possible.
Which makes a lot more sense if they don't want to die immediately. Right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Okay.
You say this is the updated version, but
there's more to it than this because there's three variants. So the first one is here. The fault is with you, and that's what we're reading right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Masoretic text, which comes late, says, "But the fault of your people," which would take the blame off of Pharaoh and put it on the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another textual variant. I'm going to pull it up for you real quick. Which is actually in the Greek Septuagint. And it says, "the sin of your people." It's the sin of your people, which is really interesting. So there's three different lineages of this text, at least. And two of them blame the Pharaoh's people. Mm-hmm. One of them seems to be blaming Pharaoh himself.
Well, that's probably not the right one, then.
Well, I don't know. I didn't do any previous research on this passage.
I'm just saying it's probably not. You wouldn't blame the Pharaoh, right?
Unless I wouldn't. I've got a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls in English behind me if you want to see what the Dead Sea Scrolls say.
I think you know the answer to that.
For anyone paying attention, this is the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible. I recommend it for anyone who wants an English translation of the biblical Dead Sea Scrolls. I've got the Hebrew translation as well behind me, but it's not really all that helpful for these types of podcasts because I can't put it on the screen so we can translate in real time. But I'm going to see what is in here for Exodus. Unfortunately, the Dead Sea Scrolls don't cover every book and chapter of the Bible. Some of them are like super fragmented. But I know we got something from Exodus. I just don't know if we have anything from chapter 5. So here's chapter 5 right here. I should get a PDF copy of this so I can use it and put it on the screen later. I'll do that for next week. So here's what we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we wanted verse 16. Yeah. So it reads 15 and 16. "Then the officers of the children of Israel cried to Pharaoh, saying, 'Why do you treat your servants this way? There is no straw given to your servants, and they say to us, make bricks. And behold, your servants are beaten, but the fault is with your own people.'" Interesting. But unfortunately, the section of text where it says your servants are beaten, but the fault is with your own people. That is a break in the text that is supplied by another text. So we don't know.
Why?
We don't actually know what is in the. We don't actually know what it would have said in the Dead Sea Scrolls because that particular line was broken.
Then why did they even include it?
Well, because it's partially there. And it seems to match the Masoretic text pretty close. So
that sucks.
So, unfortunately, we don't know what is in the oldest manuscripts, but the oldest manuscript we have in the Septuagint, which is the Greek, literally blames the Egyptians and not the Pharaoh. So I'd be curious to know what measuring stick they were using on the updated NRSV to blame the Pharaoh.
Right.
Anyways, it's neither here nor there.
Well, it's right there, but yeah.
Well, it is there. Yeah, you're right. It is there. Yeah.
It'd be cool to ask them.
I know a guy that did a little bit of work on the newest study Bible, the SBL study Bible that has the NRSV updated edition as its base. But unfortunately, I don't think I know any of the scholars that were working on the translation itself. Except for, I think David De Silva worked on some of the apocryphal books. I do have David De Silva's information. I could shoot him an email, but I don't think he would care all that much because he's more of a New Testament guy than an Old Testament guy. You know what I mean?
He's too important.
Well, he's more into the Greek than the Hebrew text.
So he wouldn't respond to you?
Well, he would. I just think he would prefer I talk to an Old Testament guy, which I will. I'll talk to somebody. We'll see. Or I'll just look up all the sources. I've got all the sources. All right, let's not waste too much time on this. Remember, we got to do 5 chapters.
Too late. All right, let's do 5 chapters. Come on, let's go.
All right, we're only doing 2 chapters, and we're almost done with this chapter.
Better than 1.
So we just read 15. How much did we actually read before we got stopped there?
Well, we went down to 21.
That's what I thought. Yeah, we went down to 21.
Because we were talking about the bad odor.
That's right. Yeah, because the odiferous and odious. Yeah. Well, let's finish the end of this chapter because that's it, and then we'll move on to chapter 6.
All right. Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, "Oh my Lord, why have you mistreated this people? Why did you even ever send me? Since I first came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has mistreated this people, and you have done nothing at all to deliver your people."
Yeah, Moses seems like he's a little unhappy with Yahweh.
Right. So I guess he did not expect any of this to happen.
Well, see, that was my thought. It's almost like God set him up.
Yeah.
He did Moses dirty there.
Right.
I feel a little bit bad for Moses on this one.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah, me too. Poor Moses.
All right, let's move on to...
That was it?
That's well, it's just, what, two verses there, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
I do love... Listen to what he ends it with, though. He says, "You have done nothing at all to deliver your people." That's a sharp charge, right? That's something you would say if you were ticked off.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you weren't ticked off, you might say like, "Hey, listen, I went to do the thing, but it didn't go go the way I thought it would go."
Right.
Maybe you can give me some pointers. But he's like, no. You sent me to the lion's den, and you've done nothing to actually do the thing you wanted me to do for you. I think Moses is pretty pissed off here. Yeah.
I can see that.
Listen, when you think about everything Moses had to do, like, because just getting the people out of Egypt is the start. He has to deal with the people after that.
Yeah.
The dude really... He did way more than any human being should be expected to do.
I mean, it's possible that at this point he's maybe questioning how much power God actually has.
I would.
I mean, right now, what has God actually done to display his power? I don't know. There was a burning bush, which is not that impressive.
They're pretty used to magic tricks in Egypt, remember?
Yeah.
You know? And we'll get to that when the plagues come up.
Yeah. Because they try to explain it away by saying, "Oh, we can do that too."
They replicated 4 of them. So I mean, you know, and the magic of Egypt is pretty well known. In fact, let me read you a text real quick. Now, I'm only bringing it up because I got it on hand today.
Okay.
I usually don't have it on my shelf. But you know, Jesus was accused of doing all of his miracles through the use of magic. Oh, is there an advertisement playing? What's happening right now?
What was that?
Where's that audio coming from?
Where is that?
Apparently, there's a commercial
Where's
playing
that
on our
coming
web
from?
browser. Oh, it's one of these tabs that I got open still. Let me close all these tabs out.
That was weird.
Oh boy. All right. I think we're safe. I think we're good to go now.
I didn't know music played in tabs that were not open.
Yeah, I mean, it happens sometimes. We got to get an ad blocker. Anyway,
Yeah.
but listen to what Kelsis says about Jesus. It's a really wild situation because Kelsis blamed, not blamed, but accused Jesus of being like an Egyptian. We'll call it a magic worker, a magician.
Okay.
Because Egypt was so well known for this type of a thing.
Hmm.
All right, let me find it. Here we go. Okay, so this is, he's like a quasi-Jew, Kelsis was, and he debated among the Christians during the early Christian era. And it says that Jesus, through poverty, being obliged to serve as a hireling in Egypt, learnt... Where are these ads coming from? Oh, it's over here. Hold on.
Where? Where's it coming
Right
from?
there. Where are these ads coming from?
What is?
What is happening? Let me close this browser out. We cannot be having this play. All right, where are these ads? Are they coming from down here? All right. Between now and next week, we're gonna figure out how to disable all of the audio from our browser tabs because that's kind of silly. Anyways, this is what Kelsis says that because he was poor, he went to Egypt as a hireling and learned certain arts for which the Egyptians are famous.
Who, Jesus?
Yeah. And after returning from thence, he thought so highly of himself on account of the possession of these magical arts as to proclaim himself to be a god.
That's
So-
what he thinks?
Well, that's what he thinks, but I'm not saying that that's true. What
I know, I'm just saying that's what like anybody would think. That's stupid.
Well, that's what some people would. I'm just saying that it was that Egypt was so well known for their magicians that it's no surprise, that Moses had to really go over the top to impress their magicians.
Did Jesus ever go to Egypt?
Oh yeah, according to Matthew chapter 2, right after he was born, because Herod sends somebody to Bethlehem to go unalive all the babies in and around the region that are 2 years old and younger, and an angel comes and warns Joseph to get up and go to Egypt and he stays there until Herod passes away.
Okay.
So we'll get there in about 17 years when we're done with the Old Testament.
Yeah. Okay, I look forward to that.
Yeah. So according to Matthew, he did spend time in Egypt, and there were legends even outside of the Bible that he spent time in Egypt. Obviously, right? So yeah, I think we're on. Did we start chapter 6 yet? I think
no.
Let's start chapter 6, and just read until you feel compelled, until you feel the hand of the Lord stopping you.
Okay. All right. All right. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. Indeed, by a mighty hand he will let them go. By a mighty hand he will drive them out of his land." So he's responding to Moses' admonition, saying, "Okay, fine. Now you'll see what I got up my sleeves."
Yeah, isn't it weird that listen, I know God, you wouldn't say that he owes anybody an apology. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But if God owed somebody an apology, I would think it would be Moses in this moment. Because he really kind of hung him out to dry.
Right.
Maybe he did apologize and we just don't read it in the text.
Yeah, that's it. Well, yeah, you wouldn't want to read about God apologizing, would you?
That's a good point. If you believe that Moses wrote this later, remember? Moses might be like, Now, I don't believe in Mosaic authorship, but I understand that most people do. But
Yeah.
like, if you envision Moses writing this, if God did apologize to Moses, you wouldn't be inclined to write that down. Oh yeah, God apologized to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
God was wrong.
Although somebody did write in Deuteronomy that Moses was the most humble man to ever live,
Yeah.
which certainly isn't something you would write about
Right.
yourself. All right. Anyways, let's read the next paragraph here. Verses 2 through 8 or 9, or until whenever we stop.
God also spoke to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they resided as aliens. I have also heard the groaning of the Israelites whom the Egyptians have enslaved, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will free you from the burdens of the Egyptians and deliver you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. He's not going to redeem all the people that already died, though, I presume.
No, they're gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
This current generation that's suffering.
Yeah.
Not the other generation. They just had to live and die.
They had to wallow and die, because 400 years is a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah. I had this one paragraph. I had a lot of stuff in my notes. There's some things.
You want me to finish it then?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. You shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has freed you from the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. Moses told this to the Israelites, but they would not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and their cruel delivery.
Yeah.
I don't blame them.
I mean, who could?
Yeah.
Okay, so a guy comes to you like, hey, God sent me to free you. We're going to go to Pharaoh. God told me to say these things, and Pharaoh's going to, do the thing. And then he goes to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh doesn't do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be so mad.
Yeah.
I'd never let Moses come back again. I mean, that's a good point. Okay, so in Deuteronomy 18, there's a test for a prophet.
Okay.
They say, how do we know that a word is spoken from the Lord? And God answers them, and he says, you know that a word is spoken from the Lord if it proves to be true or it actually takes place. So they would be, now this is obviously before Deuteronomy was given and before the law, but if that principle is kind of a universal principle, you would expect that the Israelites were like, yeah, this guy's not legit.
Right.
He's not real. I wouldn't trust him. How many lies would a televangelist have to tell you before you're like, oh, this guy not talking for God?
Apparently a lot.
No, you.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, one. That's all it took for me is one.
or zero.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell before they start lying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still, and I don't want to get sidetracked, but I'm still baffled that televangelists have a ministry. I don't know who's falling for these people.
Same people that vote Republican. Oh.
And you're not wrong.
No, I'm not wrong.
My ancestry is a big component of that. I grew up in the bubble of you have to be a Republican before you can be a Christian type of situation.
Yeah, that's what happens when you get baptized.
Yeah, right.
You get your Republican card.
All right, so let's move on. Okay, so there's some things here. First thing is a little strange. In verse 2, he says, by my name, the Lord, which is Yahweh, right? Although in the King James Bible, it says Jehovah as opposed to Yahweh. We'll address that. It says, by my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them. Which is kind of a wild thing to say because you and I already read Genesis. You and I already know that they knew the name of Yahweh. They spoke it on many occasions. I think we even talked about it once before. So I don't want to belabor the point, but it's weird here that whoever wrote this, they must have wrote it before Genesis was written.
Okay.
And then when somebody wrote Genesis, there were already all worshipers of Yahweh. And so they just put Yahweh's name in there because of, like, that's the name of our God.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Obviously, they must have used Yahweh's name. So to me, I know, we can talk about contradictions in the Bible all day. They're meaningless to me because it doesn't say anything about whether or not this God did anything that the book says.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I think this is more important because I think it tells us which text was written first. And I'm really curious about the age of a lot of these narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that this narrative assumes that something didn't happen, the oldest part of the Genesis narrative, quite a bit of it is some of the Jacob stuff, like the meeting at Bethel, which is when he does get addressed as El Shaddai, right? So to me, I just feel like this is probably a pretty archaic section of the story.
Okay.
And then there are non-archaic sections of the story in later on in chapter 6, and you can see side by side how they had two different narratives from two different time periods and smushed them together. Chapter 6 is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we start out on chapter 6 with a pretty old text, which is why we have the author not knowing the name of Yahweh previously. And then it says something interesting at the very beginning of verse 6. It says, say therefore to the Israelites, I am the Lord, or I am Yahweh. I will free you from the burdens of the Egyptians and deliver you. But to say this to the Israelites wouldn't mean anything if they didn't know the name of Yahweh, right?
Right.
So in the same passage, he's like, say to the Israelites that I am Yahweh. So I don't know, maybe this is just his way of announcing his name. Is he saying, listen, this is how you announce my name to these people who previously knew me as El Shaddai?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's kind of what I'm gathering from the text, but I'm not really sure.
This is going way over my head.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, stop that.
All right. Well, it's there's just some weird things in it, because if they knew Yahweh's name previously as El Shaddai, which they did in Genesis, and they're just now about to learn his name, his real name being Yahweh, it strikes me as intriguing that he would be like, hey, go to the Israelites and tell them that Yahweh told you such and such. Like, if they don't know who Yahweh is, they're going to be like, well, who's this Yahweh clown?
Okay.
You know, why do I care what Yahweh said? Who's Yahweh?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So there's just some strange stuff happening here, is all I'm saying.
Why is that the case then?
Well, I think that's just because these texts were written at different time periods, and they're not entirely clear as to who knew what and at what point in time did they know.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Hard to say. But I wanted to say one thing about verse 6, where it says, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and mighty act of judgment. The judgment presumably is on the Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
And to me, this is kind of a sticky thing, and we've talked about this previously. How is it that God is judging the Egyptians for the thing that he orchestrated?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, the Egyptians could have been like, hey, let's not keep them as slaves. So that's kind of their fault.
Well,
right.
If God is really this in tune with the state of affairs, why wouldn't he just prevent the Israelites from being enslaved in Egypt? Why didn't he just be like, oh, we'll just make sure when the new Pharaoh comes in, the new Pharaoh knows what's up? You know what I mean? Like, if he's really this involved, why at one point would he just not be involved unless it was his plan to have them enslaved?
Well, they were being punished, remember?
Yeah, we did talk about that, because the narrative doesn't say that they're being punished, but Ezekiel does. Ezekiel says that while they were in Egypt, they were whoring around with other deities in the lust of their youth.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I think Ezekiel, like chapter 20 or something like that.
Now, do we believe Ezekiel?
Well, Ezekiel says some weird things. So Ezekiel is one of the few prophets that really quote from Exodus a lot. He seems to be really intrigued with the book of Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book of Exodus, you also have a law about giving your firstborn child to Yahweh the same way you would like a firstborn lamb in a sacrifice. And most people took that to not be human sacrifice.
Yeah.
Ezekiel doesn't. Ezekiel says, no. God told you to offer up your firstborn as a human sacrifice so that he could horrify you. So Ezekiel himself interpreted it as child sacrifice.
Horrify you?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it give you bad laws that you could not obey.
What?
We'll read it, actually. I think it's in 23, maybe?
Okay.
We'll do... There we go. See it. Yeah, Ezekiel 23 or 26. Probably I think it's Ezekiel 20. All right. So Ezekiel says, remember, this is God speaking through Ezekiel. Moreover, I gave them statutes that were not good, and ordinances by which they could not live, and I defiled them through their very gifts, in their offering up of their firstborn, in order that I might horrify them, so that they might know that I am the Lord. Pretty wild to think about.
That doesn't make sense, but whatever, that's fine. Makes me think I shouldn't believe the other parts of Ezekiel, since he's clearly crazy.
I mean, it does. It's a tough one, because if Ezekiel is correct, then, and he's speaking for God, remember, if that's the case, then God instructed them to do child sacrifices.
That's kind of a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal. Yeah, I'd say it's a big deal.
Why did he want God to horrify them?
Well,
missing the point here, of course.
It kind of in a similar manner of Romans chapter 1, where Paul says that the people were so abased in their sins that God gave them over to their own lusts. It's kind of like the people were wicked, so God gave them over to their own wickedness, and then even increased their wickedness so that they can see how wicked they were.
Kind of like when you catch your kid smoking.
Yes,
you make them smell like a whole carton.
Exactly. Yes, it's exactly like that. Yeah, that's how I always took it. Was that God is like, oh, you want to smoke the whole carton. Smoke till you puke.
Okay.
That kind of a situation.
So would they actually kill the children then?
Well, that's the thing, is we don't really have any evidence that they were, like, there's no narratives in the Bible where they're like executing their own children, really.
Yeah.
There's a couple passages in the Bible, like in Jeremiah, where they're being accused of offering up their children and passing them through the fire, just like you would to Molech. But it seems to be that in those passages, they're not being accused of following the laws in Exodus. They're being accused of following the Canaanite they're following the worship of the Canaanite deities.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as I can tell, I don't know of any instances in the Old Testament where people are like offering up their firstborn as a sacrifice in accordance with Exodus. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really weird, because in the book of Jeremiah, God himself says that he's mad at the children of Israel for offering up their children and passing them through the fire. And he says, which is a thing that has not even crossed my mind. Offering up your children as a sacrifice hasn't even crossed my mind. Yet Ezekiel is like, yeah, God said offer your firstborn.
Well,
kind of a weird take, huh?
I guess when we get to Ezekiel, we'll have to put a big old asterisk next to it.
Right.
Saying maybe don't believe this.
Maybe Ezekiel says a lot of interesting stuff.
Huh.
He also ate bread that was baked over human dung, and that was God had him do some weird things.
Or he did it himself.
I
All
mean,
right, new topic.
well,
So
yeah,
how
well-
does this relate to whatever we were talking about 20 minutes ago?
I don't know what we were talking about at that time. Where we left off.
Let's see.
Yeah, I don't know how we got on that rabbit trail. I apologize now. I guess it's time to move on.
Yeah.
This is why we can never get anything done. Because we get lost on tangents.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
let's read
continue.
the next paragraph. Looks like 10, 11, and 12.
All right. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his land." But Moses spoke to the Lord, "The Israelites have not listened to me. Why should Pharaoh listen to me, poor speaker that I am?" Thus the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them orders regarding the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to free the Israelites from the land of Egypt.
Right.
Okay.
Isn't it weird that we now have another reference to Moses being a poor speaker?
Yeah.
How many times are you going to say it?
I mean, yeah. Because I feel like whenever they go to the Pharaoh, Aaron's the one speaking, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Seems that way.
Okay.
I mean, we're assuming so because that's what God told him to do.
Right, yeah.
We should, in the future, I'm going to pay attention for that. I want to see if it says Moses said it or Aaron said it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what if we get all these passages where it says, like, I don't know, I'm not a good speaker, make Aaron do it. Then when we get to the passage and every time it's Moses speaking,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I feel like those are the type of details that normal people look over.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like those are like, once you start noticing them, you can't not notice them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. So what's going on is God is saying, "Hey, tell them I'm going to free them." And Moses is like, "I don't think they're going to believe me since I didn't do anything last time." And so the Lord is like, "All right, well, do it anyhow." The end.
Basically, you know.
Right? It's like gave them orders regarding the Israel. What do you mean?
Right.
There was nothing there, right? I thought it was going to be like, therefore the Lord said, "All right, here's the miracles. Here's," you know what I mean? He's like, just do it again.
Yeah.
You know?
You have to, if you're in Moses' mind right now, you have to be losing it. You're just like, how is this going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, why are you doing this to me? We're supposed to be bros, but it's not feeling that way. Yeah. Let's read.
Oh, sweet. This is going to be boring and pointless.
Well, we're not going to read all these. Let's just start it. And I'll start reading it and I'll stop here in a sentence or two. And we're not going to do all the genealogy as much as I love it. It says, the following are the heads of their ancestral houses. The sons of Reuben. Interesting. Reuben's number one, huh? Remember the firstborn?
Yeah.
Remember all 12 sons from our Genesis reading?
Yeah, just don't ask me, yeah.
The firstborn of Israel. And Hanak, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. We're not going to read all through Reuben, but the next one listed is Simeon. Interesting. It's coming in order of their birth. Makes you think that this was probably written after there was already a established narrative of the 12 patriarchs.
Okay.
Right? But, you know, I didn't write it down, but one of the questions I always had here is, presumably, if these people came from bondage in Egypt, how well were they keeping their ancestral line while they were in bondage? Do you think that they slipped?
I mean, I assume there were still people there whose job it was to write this stuff down, right?
It was 400 years.
Yeah, but we know they weren't really like in bondage, right?
Right, exactly. They weren't really in bondage, and they came in with a pretty good group. I think there were 75 immediate males, 1 or 2 females, and then like servants and whatnot. So maybe they came in with 100 or 200 people. And they were there for 400 years. I was just always curious. I don't have an opinion one way or another. If there was any record keeping that was lost during the Egyptian enslavement, because it seems like there would be, depending on how bad the enslavement was. I don't know. Plus, remember, literacy is something usually higher up on the food chain.
You'd have to memorize all these, right?
Yes, yeah. A lot of these probably would have been oral traditions, or maybe they knew how to write people's names. Because your name typically would only be like 3 symbols, because they didn't even have vowels back then. So could you remember 3 symbols? Like, could you know that is your name?
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's easy enough.
It's like the first thing we teach children now, right?
Right.
So.
Right. Anyways, so let's not read through all the genealogies.
Yay.
It is important, though, the beginning and the end of the genealogy. The beginning of the genealogy starts with Reuben and then Simeon, and then it comes down to Levi. This whole genealogy is to get you to Moses and Aaron, which is from the clan of the Levites. And this is important because Moses and Aaron and their priestly function have their lineage traced. Now, what you won't see in here is a lineage for anybody past Levi.
Okay.
That's it. So somebody copy and pasted this lineage from a previously edited lineage, and they just copy and pasted up until they got to the people they wanted. Because remember the birth order in Genesis? It was Reuben, Simeon, and Levi were the eldest 3. So that's how the list would have came. And then whoever was editing this, when they got with Levi, which got you to Moses and Aaron, they're like, well, that's all we need.
Okay.
And that's all they included here. But what who you don't need? You don't need Reuben or Simeon.
Yeah.
They don't do anything for this story. This whole paragraph is just supposed to get you to Moses and Aaron.
Yeah. Good thing they weren't like, ancestors of like, I don't know, what was that?
Super long lineage.
Yeah, what was the last one's name? Not Joseph, Benjamin.
Oh, yeah.
What if they were Benjamin's ancestors? We'd have like 5 pages of this, right?
Could have been. Well, Benjamin was a small clan.
I made sense what I said.
I get you, yeah.
Yeah, you better.
I knew what you meant to say. So I say all that to say, when I reread this, it really feels like they copied and pasted a later genealogy into the text when they were editing it, without really concern for why there were just 2 random inserts at the beginning of it with Simeon and Reuben, other than, well, they're at the top of the genealogy. You know what I mean? That's why Exodus to me is it feels like a hodgepodge of texts that were put together. Like, but that's what you would expect in real life if you were living in the desert, and then you went into the promised land, and then you lived in a state of constant warfare for 400 years. You would expect that your record keepers are not as great as if you were in an established society. You would have a lot of records here, records there. Just like, you ever collect family pictures? And you're like, well, I got to call Bob because Bob's got the picture from this, and I got to call, Mary. Mary's got the pictures from this, and you end up with all these different pictures trying to source one if you're trying to put a photo album together. And I think the texts were the same way. They had all these ancient texts, but they weren't part of a unified body. And eventually they were like, we got to put this into a unified body of work. And I think we can find the seams, when we're reading it, if you're looking careful. I think this is a big seam.
Yeah.
That's all I had to say about that. Let's not do any more on the genealogies. We'll end. It says 25, Aaron's son Eleazar married one of the daughters of Petiel, and she bore Phinehas. These are the heads of the ancestral house of the Levites by their families. And that was the whole reason why this paragraph was here anyways, was to get you to the Levites. And it says, and this is the same Aaron and Moses, whom the Lord said, bring the Israelites out of Egypt, the land of Egypt, company by company. It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of Egypt, the same Moses and Aaron.
Okay.
Definitely not part of the narrative we were just reading. Why would the narratives would need to say the same Moses and Aaron in the narrative about Moses and Aaron?
You tell me.
You wouldn't
Okay.
have to do that. It's just copy and paste.
Huh.
Oh, is that the end of the chapter at 28?
Yeah, we should do another one.
Oh no, it's too late for that. It's already
It's too late for
8:30.
that. I mean, okay.
We'll do 2 chapters next week.
Yeah, right.
We'll do 2. Let's just do 2 each week.
We should do 3.
I'll pray about it. All right, so read for us 28 and 29, would you?
Okay.
We've already. I mean, we're gonna be a 2-hour session here in another couple minutes.
Yeah, but we could be 3.
I don't know if we need that.
No, but I'm just going to read this.
Yeah.
On the day when the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt. What? 2-hour session? That's a lot on there.
Oh, we started late.
What?
We must have started late. Oh, we did start late because we. Yeah.
Yeah, see, this will be a 2-hour session.
Just read the paragraph.
On the day when the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, the Lord said to Moses, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I am speaking to you. But Moses said to the Lord, since I am a poor speaker, why should Pharaoh listen to me? That was pointless. Okay.
Right.
Did you just say that a little bit ago earlier?
Yeah.
I suck at speaking. Why are you making me do this?
So you know what my Bible here does in the NRSV? It actually connected that paragraph with the next chapter, and I think this is a good demonstration as to why the chapter division in your Bibles are not always good.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had them for so long that we're just kind of stuck with them. So like you can see the new heading is here: Moses and Aaron obey God's commands, which is basically this section all the way through this paragraph. But it's split by paragraph 7. I think whoever did the original paragraphs, I forget when it was done. I don't know, like the 1300s or something. I think they probably could have made some improvements on that.
Well, why didn't I? Who decided this?
I forget. You know what? It's a name that a lot of people have heard of, but I always forget his name. Let's Google it. Who made
the 1300s? Like 700 years ago?
Yeah, it was. Oh, Stephen Langton. That's right. And it was in the 1100s and 1200s he lived. So 13th century. So I was close, but not quite on it. Although it looks like there were subsequent changes in the 1500s by William Whittingham. So there's not just one person who initiated it.
Okay.
But anyways, the long and short of it is it appears like it happened quite some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're stuck with it.
I'm surprised people were okay with him messing with the Bible.
Well, there weren't chapters and verses at one point.
Yeah. It's
So
just a big old text.
You just had to know what they were talking about, I suppose, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good. Okay, let's end on this. How would you know without chapters and verses? How would you know where to tell somebody to look in the book?
I mean, it wouldn't, of course. Well, no. I mean, I don't know.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. What marker could you use? I'm trying to think of anything.
Page numbers.
There was no page, especially with scrolls, remember?
Oh, scroll numbers. I don't know.
You had to. I assume you had to be like, well, just open the scroll like halfway and you'll find it. You know what I mean? Like you just had to give vague references.
I mean, probably just try to mention what story it was, hidden within. So they can skim it until they find the story, right?
Yeah, I could see that.
But it is interesting that all the like chapter headings and what have you, those were not in the Bible originally.
No, they weren't. But there are people who believe they were. I actually met a guy who believed, like when you read in the book of Matthew, at the beginning when it says like according to Matthew, like he thought that was actually in the original text. I'm like no, they had to add that later. That wasn't. Nothing in Matthew says according to Matthew. But I can understand why somebody would make that conclusion because you're so used to people saying, well, of course Matthew wrote it. Why wouldn't his name be in it?
Mm-hmm.
But none of their names are in it. They're added later. The earliest manuscripts don't have any names. The early church when they were copying the manuscripts, they began eventually adding the names to it. Like katamathon means according to Matthew.
They just decided that was Matthew, or are there context clues or something?
Not really, but there were witnesses from the early church that said, like, Polycarp was a disciple of the Apostle John. And so Polycarp could have vouched for John's gospel. And so there were people in the early church that were like, oh, yeah. So I think Papias was the first mention that the Gospel of Mark existed. Although there's some discussion as to whether or not the Gospel of Mark actually came from Marcion's gospel, which was rejected. That's a different story altogether. Anyways, the long and short of it is the early church had theories as to who wrote them. And those names is what we ended up with in the text. Now, there is some good, there's a possibility and some good clues in Luke that Luke is the author of Luke. That's for a different time period, a different podcast, I suppose. But as for like Matthew and Mark, I don't believe there's good evidence to know who wrote those. I think we should just consider those anonymous. The book of John is anonymous, but the authors of John tell you that they're recording John's testimony.
Oh, okay.
So in chapter 1 and in chapter 21, we've got two clear references. In fact, I'll just pull it up real quick. I said we were going to end on that last note, but we never end because this stuff is too interesting. But in John 21, at the very end of the book, the people that were actually doing the final editing says, this is the disciple who is testifying to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. It's a we. So there are multiple people here that are collecting various testimonies, and I would imagine that the bulk of the Gospel of John was John's testimony. Now, there is good reason to believe that not all of it is from John himself. But that's a whole different podcast. We're still in Exodus.
Yeah, one day.
Yeah.
One day.
We're going to get there. Anyways, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. Next week, we're going to be doing chapters 7 and 8.
And 9. Yep.
We're finally going to get to the plagues.
What? Really?
Yeah, the plagues start to really pick up here soon.
Nice.
There's going to be...
That's what Exodus is all about,
Death and murder and...
Just trying to get to the plagues, the interesting stuff.
Blood and vengeance and whatnot. Yep. It's going to be a good time. All right, so until next week, have a great one. Be safe. Kiss and hug your families, and we'll catch you in 7 days, right?
Yeah, we'll see. All right, bye.
How do I end this thing?
Bye, Lizzie.
Where are the buttons? I'm just gonna start hitting buttons until
it
stops recording.
All right.
Is it? There we go.